Tonight, the Albanese government says the voice to Parliament is just Aborigines offering the hand of friendship. So why did its Indigenous Australians Minister join other activists in telling whites to just leave?
You can go now.
You can go now.
You can go now.
You can go now.
Go now.
Are you still here?
You can go now.
You can go now.
The off.
Also tonight, the ugly abuse of a Liberal MP on the ABC for saying yes to the voice and, or no to the voice, and declaring pride in Australia. Plus, the ABC also caught out last night tricking viewers, I'd say probably lying, about what it was up to when it joined climate extremists in a dawn raid to storm the home of Woodside boss Meg O'Neill. And I'll talk to one of the pro-Israel protesters, a priest actually, who wanted to confront those ugly racists who were chanting support of Palestine and chanting hatred of Jews, and then had to run away for fear of his life. I'll show you that. But first, and again a warning, I'm going to show very disturbing clips, and this time including of Australians also acting like monsters. Australia's Day of Shame. I'm not just talking about the disgusting anti-Jewish protest last night at the Sydney Opera House. I mean, Jew hatred in front of the most iconic building in this country and beamed to the world as the image of Australia today. I mean, shameful. I mean, they said after the Holocaust, right? Never again. But here in Australia, we're seeing, yes again, that deadly hatred of Jews imported by our reckless immigration program and now fanned by the left. And even more frightening is that this poison is spreading to the Greens especially, to Labor, even to the media. You take that protest yesterday, actually backed by the New South Wales Greens. I mean, just the fact that this protest even occurred is already sick. I'm about to play distressing footage to show you how sick. These protesters yesterday, and some in Melbourne today, there's another protest tonight in Melbourne, had seen Islamist terrorists invade Israel, murder 900 people, including entire families like this one, murder children, rape women, and take more than 100 people hostage, many of them women, and some even children. These protests last night, and the ones in Melbourne tonight, they saw all that and they've celebrated. They've celebrated and attacked Israel, which is the victim here. So really that tells you these people are almost certainly anti-Jewish as well. Let's cut the crap here. Because these people clearly do not value Jewish lives that they would the lives of others. Clearly not. And if you hear some people still using that old fraud of an excuse, oh no, we're not anti-Jewish, this is anti-Zionism. It's just anti-Israel. Again, I'm going to have to play some distressing footage to put the lie to that. Dozens of these protesters at that Sydney rally chanted, "F the Jews." In fact, they also chanted much worse, "Gas the Jews," like the Nazis did. Where's the Jews? Where's the Jews? Where's the Jews? And I ask again, the Islamic leaders who failed to condemn what Hamas did to those Israeli civilians on the weekend, where are they now denouncing this? Silent. And this is a huge issue. But another of the many sick things about this protest was that the New South Wales Police actually escorted these Jew haters to the Opera House, let them disrupt the tribute there to Israel's victims, disrupt the lighting of the sails of the Opera House in the colours of Israel, yet meanwhile warned Jews to stay away from this tribute to their own people, even to their own relatives in some cases. And the only arrest on this night where people were throwing flares, chanting "Gas the Jews" and celebrating mass murder, the only arrest was of a Jewish man carrying an Israeli flag.
A person was removed from the town hall rally who was carrying a flag for his safety. He was arrested to prevent a breach of the peace for his safety. He was removed and released.
Now, the police and the New South Wales Labor government let this happen is an utter disgrace. It suggests a deference to haters of Israel and a lack of concern for Jews. If I'm wrong in that, let them show now what they can do. But it also represents a surrender to the violent at the cost of the peaceful. The mobs rule the streets, the lawful must hide at home.
I spoke with members of the Jewish community right throughout the day yesterday, and as I'd said earlier, indicated to them that people attending these positions can put themselves at significant risk. They made a decision not to attend, which I am supportive of and which I shows good sense.
Such was the official lack of concern the New South Wales Attorney-General this morning hadn't even bothered to acquaint himself with what went on. And his best advice to Jews was also, well, stay at home.
Across what happened last night at the Opera House, though?
Not really, no. I worked late last night, so I'm not really across that, no.
OK, so we had a protest last night outside the Opera House. The Israeli flag was burned and Jewish Sydney-siders were told to stay at home. This is despite your Premier Chris Minns declaring that we were going to light up the sails of the Opera House to show solidarity with Jewish people living here in Australia.
Well, I think everybody needs to just calm down and, as you say, do stay at home.
At least the Premier later seemed deeply embarrassed.
I don't think that protest should have gone ahead. I don't think the organisers should have called it. I think that it rips apart, in small measures, potentially larger measures, the cohesion that we have in New South Wales. If there were acts that meet the threshold for charging in relation to racial vilification or incitement of hatred or incitement of violence, then action will be taken. And I understand the New South Wales Police have formed a task force for that purpose.
Nice words, but such is the rot that the New South Wales Government's Parliamentary Secretary for Multiculturalism even had a son at this protest. This guy chanting support for Palestine after the biggest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. But, you know, I think we have to get some perspective here because a lot of people, it's very easy to turn this into an attack on the New South Wales Labor government. That's where a lot of people have gone, sheer incompetence, insensitivity, stupidity, all that. I got that. But that is not our biggest problem here. For a start, I want to know how we had an immigration program that's left us now trying to deal with people bringing their ancient hatreds and biases to our streets, making them unsafe, calling for the gassing of Jews, scaring police so much that they warn Jews to stay away and not cause trouble that the police can't actually deal with. And then there's the politicians who are feeding these hatreds or looking for votes from Muslim communities by going hard on Israel. And this is how that Jew-hating poison spreads, infecting even our politics. And for example, you check out Mehreen Faruqi, Deputy Leader of the Federal Greens, Deputy Leader, reacted to the slaughter, rape and kidnapping of Jews. This is an older photo of her, support for Palestine. But this week she attacked the plan to light up Parliament House in the colours of Israel's flag. She complained one colonial government supporting another. What a disgrace. But let's look at Labor as well. It's tried for years, since the Gillard days, even before, to get the Muslim vote, which is up to a quarter of the voters in some Labor seats and it's done that by insulting Israel. The Albanese government, for instance, reversed Australia's policy and said, no, we're not going to recognise any longer Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Labor's National Conference recently also said Australia should recognise Palestine as a nation, even though Gaza, where 2 million Palestinians live, is actually run by the Hamas terrorist group, which just ordered those killings and kidnappings in Israel. That's what recognising Palestine means, Hamas. Now, these are moves that have been pushed in particular by former Labor Foreign Minister Bob Carr, former New South Wales Premier as well, who this time tweeted, yes, Israel has a right to defend itself from attacks, yep, but Hamas has won a tactical success. Sure, it'll be very short-lived. It will draw disproportionately huge retaliation directed at civilians and indifferent to children. So there's a former Labor Foreign Minister saying, oh, tactical success for Hamas. But oh dear, it's going to draw a disproportionate response from those Israelis who are going to direct it at civilians, those Israelis who are indifferent to children. Not a word of criticism for Hamas, for itself having deliberately slaughtered children raped and kidnapped Jewish women. Not a word. How disgusting. Again, it is like Jewish lives no longer have much value. And where were the federal ministers, like Tony Burke? Your seat of Watson is almost 25% Muslim voters. Silent about the horror in Israel until today. And still today didn't damn yesterday's protest. And now under the sails of the Sydney Opera House, we hear gas the Jews as police stand by and arrest only a Jew who dares to protest. The world has now seen this shame too and heard only the barest minimum of criticism from this Labor government. Australia's shame and Australia's danger. And to our guest. One man did confront those protesters last night attacking Israel and the Jews. Confront those protesters supporting terrorist attacks. He was Mark Leach. He's an Anglican churchman, he's a rector. His mother was a Jewish survivor of the Holocaust. And here's what happened though, when he brought along an Israeli flag to show support for the victims of those Hamas terrorists. He soon found out that our streets are not safe either from supporters here of that attack. Mark Leach joins me now. Mark Leach, thank you so much for your time. Why did you go to that protest?
Well, thank you for having me on, Andrew. You know, on Monday morning when I heard that the protest was being organised, I knew the kinds of chants that would be chanted, the genocidal call to ethnically cleanse Israel from the river to the sea. And I heard that the police were advising Jewish people to stay at home. And I thought, as a Christian pastor and as a Jew, my mum's a Jew, she fled the Holocaust from Germany in 1938. I thought someone from Australia, some citizen, has to turn up and show that we stand with Israel and we stand against the genocidal barbarism of Hamas, and that we will not be cowed by the Islamist strategy of instilling fear in a community and silencing them, lest perhaps we offend their delicate jihadist sensibilities. So I just thought, well, I should go. I had initially planned to just watch and pray from the steps of the Anglican Cathedral. I was wearing my clerical shirt and I was just going to pray over the event. And then I was going to go down to the Opera House to meet, to watch the flags and to pray over that. And that was what I planned to do until I heard members in the crowd start to chant, "Kill the Jews." At that point, I thought, I can't just stand here. I have to do something. So I unfurled the Israeli flag and I waved it for about a minute. And then I was very quickly surrounded by a group of angry young men who then, which that video clip didn't show, continued. A group of them chased me up Bathurst Street, down George Street, at which point the police intervened and stopped them from chasing me.
They actually chased you over a block or two. Look, how frightened were you?
Look, I was very, very frightened. As a Jew, you know, we've had 2,000 years of persecution and fleeing. And so when I hear 1,000 people chanting, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," I know they are calling for my people to be massacred. We saw on Saturday morning what that chant looks like when it's enacted. So I was really, really scared. Now I'm sure the vast majority of people there, perhaps none of them meant me any physical harm, but it just takes one riled up Muslim with a knife to inflict serious harm. So I was very, very scared.
The protest supporting a terrorist attack, a protest that was actually backed by the Greens Party and protected by the police, ended with many in the crowd chanting "F the Jews" and "Gas the Jews." What did you make of this? What does it tell you about Australia today?
Look, I think it tells us that we've bought the Islamist lie, hook, line, and sinker, that Hamas and the Arabs in the Middle East are the victims who need protecting from this Western colonialist, capitalist invading superpower. And I don't think they understand. I mean, the most charitable interpretation is they don't really understand the theology and the ideology behind Hamas, that they don't want land. They want to eradicate the state of Israel, and they want to eradicate Jews. So that's a charitable interpretation. I mean, I was disturbed that as a Jew in 2023, I was not safe on the streets of Sydney. I phoned the police before attending, and they said to me, "We can't guarantee your safety. We advise you do not attend." And I thought, I'm a citizen of Australia. I have the right to free speech, and I pay taxes. I vote. I have the right to be safe on the steps of my own cathedral in the middle of Sydney in broad daylight. So I think I think the policing was weak, and I can't understand why the Greens support this. I live in a Greens electorate, which I just don't understand it. It is such a far cry from cuddly koalas and saving the environment, which is a good thing, to supporting genocidal rapists and murderers. It beggars belief that the Greens would do this, to be honest.
Mark Leach, I think it's a lot to do with the new tribalism, I'm afraid, and we'll discuss that later in the show. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you also for standing up for at least some civilised virtues. I really appreciate that too. Thank you so much. But to the latest from Israel. More than 900 people now confirmed killed by the terrorist attacks. More than 100 believed to be taken back to Gaza as hostages, many of them women. Here are the faces of some of them. And a spokesman for Hamas, the terrorist group that runs Gaza, says it will respond to an Israeli attack on people's homes in Gaza, the attacks without warning, by executing their civilian hostages and broadcasting that with audio and video, just as the Islamic State did, so that you know exactly what kind of people you're dealing with here. This is the Hamas that has supporters marching now in our streets tonight in Melbourne. Joining me from Tel Aviv is Major Libby Weiss, spokesman for the Israeli Defence Forces. Major Weiss, thank you so much indeed for your time. What has the IDF done so far in reprisals for this attack?
Well, of course, this is a very dynamic situation in which truly the battle is taking place continuously as we speak. So the first priority, of course, has been on securing the Israeli border, securing the civilian communities along Israel's border with the Gaza Strip. The IDF has been doing that nonstop in the last several days. At this stage, there is more control around those civilian communities, but of course, we are constantly continuing to search for Hamas terrorists who we know are operating within Israel, who are still in Israel, and preventing continuous attacks by Hamas, again, on Israel and Israeli civilians. So the situation is a very, very dynamic one, and the sense of true war and the war zone continues here as we speak.
So you've actually still got terrorists that you're trying to neutralise that are still in Israeli territory. Is that what you're saying too?
We suspect that that is certainly a possibility, and we need to make sure that we do everything possible to find them if they are operating within Israeli territory. Of course, this was a very large mass of terrorists who invaded on Saturday morning. So the IDF remains constantly aware, monitoring the situation, and prepared for any potential engagement with these terrorists in Israeli territory. And we know that Hamas continues to try to infiltrate into Israeli territory along the border. So again, this sense of urgency remains and has not diminished in any way since the weekend.
Now, you're clearly preparing for a land-based operation. You've called in the reservists. 300,000 people have already turned up in just a couple of days. An incredible operation that. How big an invasion, land invasion, are we possibly looking at here?
You know, we're really not there yet to be able to talk about if it would happen or what it would be. You know, any kind of decision like that is something that is made by the government and by the cabinet. In terms of the IDF, though, we are ready for any operational situation and any eventuality. And this call up of reservists, I think, also speaks to the sense of attack that we are all feeling. This is a sense here that we are fighting to protect our homes, fighting to protect our families and our loved ones. And everybody here feels so victimized by what took place over the weekend when we see just the number of innocent civilians killed, those who were dragged into the Gaza Strip. There's a true sense here of everybody wanting to protect their loved ones and protect their homes. So any decision of escalating, of course, will be decided by the cabinet and the government, and the IDF will take that and respond as instructed.
Yeah, and I don't think you're about to announce it in advance in a TV interview. But the hostages, you mentioned some of the hostages alone, that's going to be a nightmare to deal with. Have you got any idea how that's going to affect your operation? What sort of considerations you'll bring to bear in what to do?
Of course, it's a very challenging reality in terms of the operational aspects of this, of any potential operation or what's going on right now. I mean, first and foremost, the best way to secure the safety of these innocent civilian hostages is for Hamas to release them immediately, for Hamas to release the grandparents, the mothers, the children, the innocent families. That is first and foremost the best way to ensure their safety, which is for Hamas to release them immediately, to let civilians go back home and to not let them be part of this conflict. So, of course, that is the number one thing that can be done at this stage. And the operational reality is absolutely a very challenging and complicated one.
There's meanwhile another danger, as if you haven't got enough trouble here, pulling big forces to the south to deal with Gaza and Hamas leaves you weak in the north, or potentially weak in the north. You're bordered with Lebanon, where Hezbollah, another terrorist group, also funded by Iran, controls a lot of territory and more than 10,000 rockets aimed at Israel. Are there signs that Hezbollah is preparing any major attack?
Well, we've been monitoring the situation on all of our borders, but certainly on the borders in the north very, very closely. We have seen some isolated events. About 2 mornings ago, I believe it was, Hezbollah launched several mortars into Israel. And then yesterday, of course, we did have several infiltrations by members of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, another terrorist organization that is operating there. But we send a very clear message to any other terror organization, to any other state who harbors those terrorists and supports those terrorists, to not get involved in what is taking place right now and to not test the IDF. But we are, of course, remaining at the highest level of alert and also bringing, of course, reservists and soldiers there to monitor the communities in the north as well.
And finally, Major Vice, and thank you for your time, but we have politicians here calling for restraint, which they seem to do every time, Israel is forced to respond. Seems aimed more at you than on Hamas. After everything that was done to Israel over the weekend, what restraint are you prepared to offer?
First and foremost, our responsibility as a military is to protect our citizens and to protect our country. And after this horrific slaughter that we saw, our main priority is protecting our citizens. And we will do that. We will do that in whatever way we have to, however we're called to do that, of course. And, I think that the tragedy of what we saw this weekend is something that everybody can recognize. Any reasonable person anywhere in the world can see that this is what we saw here was horrific. These were crimes, war crimes committed against innocent civilians. This is not an issue of politics or an issue of ideology, one way or the other. These are humans. This is a human tragedy perpetuated by terrorists who wanted to do what they did. This was their goal. And we will do whatever is necessary within the IDF to protect our civilians and to protect our communities and to protect our homes, which is exactly what we've been doing.
Thank you for your time, Major Libby Vice. Appreciate it. After the break, court out how the ABC did collude with global warming extremists as they prepare to attack the home of a woman who leads a gas company. Plus, more primetime abuse of a politician who wants to vote against The Voice and to be proud of Australia. Has the ABC lied to us? Well, you see, last night it showed a Four Corners documentary on a radical global warming group in Perth. Some of them are not much older than kids, basking in the attention. These are people who already let off a stink bomb at the headquarters of Woodside, the gas giant in Perth, forcing an evacuation of the building. But this time, Four Corners were there from the start of another protest, in the preparation phase, this time involving paint guns, it seems.
They've invited us to their rehearsal. We don't know their exact target.
Didn't know the exact target, said the ABC. Didn't know the exact target. Despite devoting a reporter and a big crew to the whole operation in Perth, one they must have figured would create headlines, this operation, or why bother sending all those people? Something doesn't figure there. Well, as it turns out, this particular operation by this particular group was a dawn raid, the invasion of the home of Woodside boss Meg O'Neill and a family. And Four Corners even had a camera in the car to record it all, while its crew followed in a van behind.
It's August 1st, protest day.
Do you know where you're going, Jesse? Yep.
Oh, I should tell everyone we're going to touch down in about what?
5 minutes.
Yeah.
Probably right on sunrise, I reckon.
Anyone have any final words?
Oh, yeah.
Bye, Tilda. Nice knowing you.
I'm just very, 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 very proud.
This is the moment Tilda's been preparing for.
You can tell these are people clearly feeling like they're stars of a drama much bigger than themselves, particularly with an ABC camera right there to capture them. They're acting, I mean, this is incitement in a way. Joining me is Sophie Ellsworth, media writer of the Australian newspaper. Sophie, thanks for your time. As it turns out, police were actually waiting at Meg O'Neill's home and arrested the activists as soon as they set foot on the ground. But has the ABC lied to us about how much it knew about this planned home invasion? Because its statement at the time when it became a controversy, you and I were talking about it, claimed it was only just prior to the action that its Four Corners team received the tip to go to an address. They had no knowledge of what was at that address or that it was someone's home. Sophie, they had no knowledge of what action was going to occur there, and the ABC team in no way colluded with the activists. Do you believe that after watching last night's documentary?
Andrew, what complete and utter garbage. This is an investigative program. It pins itself as being the, best investigative program in the country, and yet they had no idea where they were going. They just happened to have a camera crew on the morning of August 1, a camera crew inside the car with the activists, but they had no idea where they were going. What absolute rubbish. And Andrew, the press releases, the statements they put out, I printed them off today. They said on August 2, they had no knowledge of what action was going to occur at this property. And then on August 11, they changed their tune, they did a review, and they said they did have some awareness of what was going on there. This is the ABC absolutely caught red-handed lying to the Australian public. And I think really tough questions, Andrew, need to be asked in Senate estimates. This is absolutely disgraceful. And this is what the media have to get from the ABC. They put out these statements. It was utterly wrong, utterly false. They were caught totally, telling falsehoods. This is absolutely shameful, and I really hope in Senate estimates in a couple of weeks the bosses are really put under the spotlight here and answers must be given about what on earth was going on.
Yes, they had no idea of what was going to happen as they filmed the protesters actually filling paint guns. They got tipped off just before the operation when in fact they'd already had time enough to install a camera or a crew in the car going with the protesters. I mean, seriously. This documentary was so pro the protesters, making them seem like heroes, Sophie, and it was also demanding, the reporter was demanding the Police Assistant Commissioner to explain all those police arresting these protesters. Here's a couple more grabs.
The group Disrupt Burrup Hub is trying to stop one of Australia's biggest fossil fuel projects. This is the story of the battle for the future and the lengths all sides will go to win. I guess, how do you justify devoting this amount of resources towards this group and this particular protest?
God, Sophie, the ABC is meant to be impartial because it's taxpayer funded. Was this documentary in any way impartial?
Andrew, that's almost a joke of a question.
I know it is.
We're paying for this kind of content. We're paying for this. The mums and dads, the people out there at home struggling with cost of living are giving the ABC $1 billion a year, and they're spending it on content like this, and then their communications team is putting out rubbish statements which are completely false, and then they hold a review and go, oh, sorry, actually they did know what was going on, but they didn't collude with them. This is a complete and utter joke. And as I said, there needs to be answers. David Anderson, the managing director, needs to be put before Senate estimates and told how could they put out a statement that was utterly false, utterly wrong, and then go, oh, we had a review. Actually, they did kind of know what was going on, but in no way were they in cahoots. What an utter load of rubbish. And I hope that Paul Barry does his job, Andrew, on Monday and goes to town on this. This is utterly disgraceful.
Oh, Sophie, you are so naive. It comes from being so young, Sophie. When you get to my age, you will lose that naivety. Now, also last night on the ABC's Q&A was this very nasty, very personal abuse from an Aboriginal activist, Natasha Wanganeen, against federal Liberal MP James Stephens, who was against The Voice. Here he is.
I think European colonisation has been an overwhelmingly good thing for the great society that we live in. I'm a proud Australian.
I'm a Narungga, Noongar, Ngarrindjeri and Kaurna woman, first before anything, and I will never be a part of that. That is disgusting.
Well, she chewed him out. That's only a short bit of it, but she chewed him out and said it was a disgrace, etc., etc. The host, Patricia Kovelis, didn't seem to care that one guest was being abused so personally, also by the audience, abused by the audience. What do you make of it?
I couldn't believe what I was watching last night, Andrew, again on the taxpayer-funded broadcaster that we pay for. Patricia Karvelis, I think, asked the Liberal MP 3 or 4 times about colonisation. This was clearly to get that grab, to clearly make headlines. And some of the conduct on that panel, she didn't pull up Natasha Wanganeen for the way she was speaking to the Liberal MP. And then you hear the crowd cheering this on, as always. Where is the balance in the ABC? Someone in there is running this place. There's just no balance, Andrew, and that's why Q&A viewers are tuning off.
Someone in there is running this place. It's called the staff collective. No one really is responsible. The staff just do as they please, and the managers just nod along, not wanting any trouble. Sophie Ellsworth, thank you so much indeed for your time. After the break, is there a link between people who back The Voice, say yes to The Voice, and people who were yesterday backing the Islamic terrorists who slaughtered Jews? And The Voice is damaged by Linda Burney's latest stunt, telling the rest of us to just go. Right, so it's only 4 days to go until the big vote on Labor's Voice. But I've got to show you something that might help explain why Labor has been hiding Indigenous Australians Minister Linda Burney in these last critical days of the campaign. How often has Burney told us that this Voice, this Aboriginal-only advisory parliament, is a generous offer, a hand of friendship, something that would actually unite us? Well, the poll suggests that most Australians don't believe a word of that, and no wonder, because let me now show you the end of a documentary that SBS ran the other day about Aboriginal artist and activist Richard Bell. It's a documentary by activist and academic Larissa Beerant, who identifies as Aboriginal, and it ends the film with Burney and other Aboriginal activists not being very uniting at all.
You know, James Cook planted the flag down on Possession Island, so that's all he claimed as far as I'm concerned. So everybody should be just shifted there, and then they can apply, you know, for a passport if they want. They can all move to Possession Island, but just go there. You can go now. You can go now.
You can go now.
You can go now.
Go now.
Are you still here?
You can go now.
You can go now.
Off.
Joining me is the Tuesday panel, Stephanie Bastian, Research Fellow at the Women's Forum Australia, and Will Kingston, host of Australiana, a weekly podcast from The Spectator on politics and culture. Stephanie, why would Bernie have agreed to say something so stupid?
Look, I think this campaign it's been led by elites, but it's run by radicals, and Lisa is part of that. And what we've seen throughout this campaign is it started off with trying to convince voters. They've then gone and accused the No campaign of misinformation, but it's almost been a self-fulfilling prophecy. They're the ones that have continuously misled. They haven't been direct about the fact that there's a treaty to follow. Even basic facts like how many pages in the Uluru Statement, everything, one after another, has been misinformation and disinformation. That hasn't worked. People have grown increasingly mistrustful of what's going on. And so now they're resorting to threats and name calling, and that's exactly what we're seeing. It's insult. And the more they do this, the more people are just pushing away and saying, no, this is not about uniting Australia. This is about insulting our intelligence and demanding that we succumb to what these elites want.
Well, on that point exactly, Will, I mean, isn't that one of the key problems with the Yes campaign? That it really does sound like all take by Aboriginal activists and no give at all. I mean, not the slightest offer to end the division, accept Australia's institution, end the grievance mongering, end the racial division. Not at all.
Andrew, admittedly, a very kind producer sent that link through to me before the show. I didn't get a chance to watch that footage until just then. I'm actually quite taken aback by it. I find that really quite disgraceful. I think this is the problem with The Voice. I saw in that tweet, Linda Burney said The Voice is about two things. I imagine it was like recognition and also an advisory body. I think the two things are actually The Voice is about the past and the present. And the problem is too many people who are running this campaign for The Voice are looking at the past and looking at this divisive, awful history wars to try and rewrite Australian history with this black armband view of how we should think about our past. If more people who were on the Yes side actually were looking at the present and looking at The Voice as a practical mechanism to try and help Indigenous people, this may have had a shot, but they're not. It is a small group of activists who are trying to rewrite Australian history, and I find it, to be honest, really sickening. We need to focus on the here and now.
I think that's correct. Is there a link, Stephanie, between supporting The Voice and supporting the Hamas attack on Israel? I know that's very inflammatory to ask that, and a lot of people would say no, they support The Voice, they don't support the attack on Israel. But listen, Australia's top Muslim bodies have backed The Voice and attacked Israel after the terrorist attack. So did the Greens Deputy Leader, Mehreen Faruqi. And I even saw Aboriginal flags at last night's pro-Palestine rally. Many Voice supporters may well support Israel, but is there a link here that The Voice may be tribal politics and supporting Hamas even after the slaughter is tribal too? I don't say Mehreen Faruqi necessarily supported Hamas, but she did attack Hamas's victim.
Look, I think there is a link between the political elements of Islam and the hard left, where Islam turns a blind eye to Labor's radical social agenda in support of a weakened position on Israel and some radical elements within their community. It's disappointing to see senators like Senator Farouk coming out and condemning colonisation when she has directly benefited from it. And if we have a look at what colonisation has done for our country here and in Israel, it's provided first-class healthcare, education, equal rights, all the things that you don't see under a regime such as Hamas. And so I think that if you don't recognise that and you can't see the benefits of the country that we live in, then perhaps some of these people that are standing with Hamas and their totalitarian regime should spend some time living under it.
Well, what do you reckon? I mean, by the way, you're in New York. I mean, you've had the rallies there against, against Israel. After seeing this horror, rallies in New York denouncing Israel, not Hamas. I mean, the tribal politics seems to be in play, and it's like the Black Lives activists move, activists, the left and all that. The tribal element seems very, very clear here.
Yes, it does. To be honest, Andrew, I was less concerned about the rallies in New York than I was about seeing footage of rallies in front of the Opera House, in front of Sydney Harbour. I'm not even think I'm allowed to say on TV what I heard being chanted, which reverberated across Sydney Harbour. Many of your viewers will have seen that. I was shaken so fundamentally to sit in New York and hear those comments. I struggle actually to comprehend it. I think what I would say is that this idea of tribal identity politics needs to be resisted in a country like Australia, and the uniting principle that we need to endorse is the nation state, is Australia. Now, the thing which I think ties these things together is ultimately The Voice is about putting us into different categories: white Australians, immigrant Australians, Indigenous Australians. And whilst I can understand the emotional pull of that, we are seeing the consequences of identity politics writ large as a result of that mistake. What we need to think about is we are all Australians and we support our Australian identity above and beyond any other tribal identity. And if we don't do that, there are very, very worrying consequences.
Absolutely true. Will Kingston, Stephanie Bastian, thank you to you both. After the break, for balance, a little plea for you, really serious plea to vote for The Voice. It's from a leading Voice campaigner.
The totems of the kangaroo and the emu are really important.
See if this changes your mind. And to culture wars, and never as the word war sounded less like a metaphor and more like a reality. But listen, I've got to interrupt the show. I've been quite negative about The Voice. So, equal time and all that kind of stuff. We better show you the heartfelt pitch by the Labor's new voice on The Voice since they sidelined the Indigenous Australians Minister Linda Burney. It's Melandiri McCarthy, also Minister. And she put her fervent pitch for you to vote for The Voice on the Channel 7 debate about The Voice on Sunday. Here she is.
This is an opportunity, my fellow Australians, just like we see the opportunity on our future here. We see that the totems of the kangaroo and the emu are really important.
Join me as Rowan Dean, editor of The Spectator Australia and host of Outsiders here on Sky News on Sundays at 9 a.m. Rowan, no doubt shifted your mind. I mean, this woman's had a couple of years to really think about something that matters deeply, deeply, deeply to her, and it comes down to the emu and the kangaroo. I'm glad we've got that out there, and you will no doubt now vote yes.
She left out the koala bear. How much can a koala bear? I mean, seriously, to leave out the koala, I think that's kind of speciesism of the worst kind, let alone the blue-tongued lizard.
But where did it come from? Where did the emu come from? I know that the Prime Minister referred to the emu and the kangaroo in his big launch for the campaign, saying, like the emu and the kangaroo, they don't run backwards. And I'm not quite sure what relevance that has. It's actually quite a scary thing if you think about it. But where did these two come from?
It's extraordinary. They've had nothing to say. They're in the last leg. There are a couple of days left, and they still have nothing. Not a single reason to promote The Voice. Exactly. Not a single reason. Jacinta Price said it brilliantly the other day. You haven't managed to make your case in any shape or form, despite every opportunity to do so. We're down to the gum leaves and the kangaroos and that. And by the way, I hope The Voice is defeated, but I hope when it is defeated, can we please put an end to all this ridiculous welcome to country, acknowledgement of country, every airplane you sit on, every meeting you go to, scrap the lot of it. Gum leaves, stop burning them, let them sit on the trees, let the koalas get on with their business, and let's stop all this other nonsense.
You leave the gum leaves to the koalas. Now, something's been bugging me, Rowan. So much of the reaction to the anti-Israel, anti-Jewish protests in Sydney last night, and there's another protest this evening in Melbourne, anti-Israel, missing the big point, I think. I mean, it's true, the police should have perhaps stopped the protesters from getting to the Opera House, and it's true, the New South Wales government was slack and deaf and whatever. I got all that. And people say, oh, look, the protest was insensitive. It should have been more respectful, maybe held another time. Wrong. The big issue is that we now have so many people who see what was done to Jews in Israel and then think good. Think good. They celebrate. 900 people killed. They celebrate. Whole families killed. They celebrate. I mean, it's just disgusting.
Well, it's worse than disgusting. We're always told how bad misogyny is, and I agree with that. This is a case, what happened to the girl? Let's just look at what happened last weekend. You had a group of violent and vile men perpetrating the most disgraceful, disgusting, vile human rights abuses against young women. They raped them, they kidnapped them, they raped them, they shot them, they butchered them, they broke their bones, they gang raped them, they then burnt them, they desecrated their bodies, they paraded their bodies. This is sick beyond belief. I mean, it's not misogyny, this is kind of psychopathic sadomisogyny on steroids. It is so grotesque. Every Australian should be vomiting at what happened to these girls. And yet, here we have a group of people, around 1,000 apparently, not only agreeing with this on whatever grounds, but celebrating it, ululating, rejoicing in it, fetishizing in what is a grotesque sexual perversion of the worst sort. Now, we do not let pedophiles into this country. We do not let rapists into this country, nor should we be letting people who rejoice in and indulge in fantasizing about and encouraging the worst, most disgusting, psychopathic, sadistic misogyny that I have ever heard of in my lifetime. Anybody who holds those views or even entertains those views should not be in this country under any circumstances. This is the biggest failing of our immigration system. Anthony Albanese is about to let 400 and something thousand more people into this country. Our immigration is failing if we are letting people in who fetishize about the butchery of young women. We have to put an immediate halt, Andrew, on our immigration and say no one in any way affiliated with any of the individuals who paraded outside Sydney Harbour yesterday, which was a memorial, a sacred memorial dedicated to the deaths of those women. To desecrate a grave, to desecrate a dead body is one of the greatest crimes known in our civilization. Anyone connected, linked, affiliated through family, through business, through community, to any of those individuals who were parading around outside the Opera House yesterday should never be allowed to set foot in this country. The government must make it very clear. The coalition must say there will be no immigration from anywhere that is connected to the individuals who so disgracefully treated those women yesterday in Sydney.
Except we're looking at a lot of second-generation people who went through our schools and universities, and that says something about our failure to integrate and preach love of Australia. Rowan Dean, thanks for your time. That's it from me. Chris Kenny is next. Good night.